In this video, we'll be presenting 60 seconds of truth. And it's really a window into a lot of correlations between thought and reality, because that's what we consider to be true. Truth is a pattern of thought, a pattern of language that seems to dovetail nicely with the underlying reality that it presents. So let's get started. When we start off with the whole, the totality, the sphere, the mind, through the distinctions of language, can cut and parse and combine reality in an infinite series of distinctions. And yet reality is bigger than that. Reality goes beyond that. And the mind cannot track and integrate all of the infinite distinctions, meaning reality is bigger than the mind. Consciousness, observing itself, creates reality by defining, by measuring, by contrasting one thing with another. Consciousness, observing itself, creates reality through the filters it uses to perceive, focus on, and define energy. And so the ego consciousness, the I that says this compared to this, looks out at the larger self of which it is a part in the infinite fabric of connectivity, looks out at the larger self of which it is a part, and creates a rendition of that larger self through distinctions, and then choosing which distinctions to combine and focus on, in what order, which creates a montage, a personal rendition of reality. Set theory dictates that one cannot understand a set until one is outside of it, and that all of the participants, all of the observers in a set, participate together in some way to create and sustain the narrative that is a set. All reality is set theory, reality being a theory used to describe energy that the observer believes. Every system is flawed and thus painful to some degree. Freedom comes from transcending the identity that exists in the context of a given system. To remember a part of the self, an identity that exists outside the system, and in doing so, lifting out of the system and healing the illusion of pain, born in the illusion of separation. Every person in the history of humankind has shared a desire to feel sustainably good and to avoid feeling chronically bad. All human behavior, therefore, is a direct or a circuitous effort, an effective or a less effective method of attaining that underlying goal sustainably. All relationships go through a template or process, be they a romantic relationship, a family relationship, or the relationship with the human body in the life cycle. The first step of the relationship can be characterized with an experience and birth into the unknown, and with it, innocence, and with that innocence, victimhood. Because you cannot be a victim of something you fully understand and have freedom around. But truly so, an infant, a child, is a victim of circumstance, is innocent of the surrounding, and is a yes to all things. And with that yes comes a profound experience of being shaped by, of being influenced by. It begins in a feminine state. The next state is the antithesis, as we go from the child with the innocent yes to the adolescent with the reactive no. We go into the state of antithesis, of rebellion, of no, of separation, of unconscious and conscious no, and also of inferiority. The next step is the adult. And the adult is defined by awareness, by the ability and willingness to respond, by understanding, by acceptance and equality. The adult is free to move from the unconscious sympathy of the child to the unconscious antipathy of the adolescent, to the conscious integration of the adult. The ability to transcend the reaction, to observe and transcend the reaction by consciously choosing when, where, and why to say yes to some things in some situations and no to other things in other situations. Transcending, remembering, reconnecting, and becoming aware of the self, of the identity outside of the system, is the final step of any process. So you have the birth into the child, the rebellion of the adolescent, the integrity and the power of the adult, and then you have the death of the body and the leaving of the system. You have the beginning of the relationship with its falling in love. You have the antipathy of the relationship as you judge and project everything on self onto other. you have the maturity of the adult relationship that is neither controlled by or controlling another human being. And finally, you have the death of the relationship, either through physical death, one or both people dying physically, or one or both people letting the identity that is born in any relationship fall away. There is no reality that we see which we do not also play a role in creating through causing or allowing. And one of the ways that we can see this is that when we, for example, watch the news, which is often the cocktail of adrenaline, curated by choice in different networks, we choose to respond or to numb, to integrate action or not to. And in doing so, we also affect the correlating fractal patterns of energy in our own lives. When we judge someone for being in pain in the news, we are a participant in choosing to do nothing or choosing to engage. But we are also a participant in our personal reality as our psyche learns how to interpret the behavior towards what's out there, towards the corresponding inner personas in here. And in doing so, to reinforce that direction of reality, or to dissolve it. As human beings, we will always be dominated and controlled in the end by that which we seek to avoid, dominate, and control. And a way to look at this is the phenomena of attachment. You cannot let go of something one attempts to control. In order to control something, you have to attach to it. If this hand wants to control this hand, it has to attach to the hand, and it has to exert pressure. The act of control consumes energy, and it binds the fate. It binds the fate of the one trying to control with the one allowing the control. And it feeds. When you attempt to control something, inside or out, it feeds energy into that which is being controlled. Now, if you think of the relationship of a bully, in most cases, trying to control a victim, usually what happens is over time the victim crystallizes into an identity that is strong enough to overthrow the bully. Now, this happens in nations, when the French overthrew the tyranny of the kings. It happens with nations when Hitler tried to control the world and was controlled by the world. It happens on an individual level where a determination not to have a certain feeling dictates a series of decisions, which dictate yet a series of more decisions, which means that ultimately one's entire life and freedom is controlled by the effort not to feel a certain feeling, which means that that feeling and the effort to avoid feeling it shapes an entire life. One of the most important windows into understanding either ourselves or another human being is seeing the inner age, the age of the one inside of us that's looking out, and the age of the one out there who's engaging with us. The reality of the inner age suggests that regardless of the chronological age of the body, that the felt experience of our own and another's reality stems largely from whether we're looking at reality through the victimhood of a 5-year-old, through the naivete of a 5-year-old, through the terror and trauma of a 3-year-old, or through the eyes of the adult self that is present in the here and now. To understand another's experience, we must understand and thus see how old they feel inside as they meet us through the prism of an inner age. Masculine and feminine energy are inextricable faces of a core united energy viewed through a binary lens which splits the one into distinction, the whole into polarity, up and down, in and out, hot and cold, fast and slow, giving and receiving, speaking and listening. All flow emerges with the successful reintegration of polarity. When a speaker is paired with a listener, when a giver is paired with a receiver, when a leader is paired with a follower, a teacher with a student, a parent with a child. The flow of the one is restored in the orgasm of connection, of re-becoming one. Every conscious mind obliterates, blocks, and obscures 99% of all reality. So if you think of what a conscious mind is, it's an identity of separation from the larger ecology in which we are nested. I cannot take a breath without the gift and nourishment of the trees. I cannot take a drink without the gift and nourishment of water. I cannot consume food and sustain my body without the gifts and nourishments of plants and animals. That in turn cannot exist without a planetary host body. I am inextricably connected to all that is on a mathematical framework. But when I say I, as the distinction between this part of energy and the larger part of energy of which I am inextricably connected, I create my consciousness as less than a speck of a speck of a speck, as less than 1% of reality. But there's much more to it, because having defined the individual as less than 1% of reality, I look through 5 lenses of perception. Among the infinite lenses of perception that exist. And I look in a very narrow bandwidth through those lenses of perception. Eyes see light within a frequency range of this to this, with a vast spectrum of energy that goes on endlessly above and below that range. Ears see energy within a very narrow spectrum, between here, and below it and above it exists a vast continuum of sound, not registerable by the human ear. In other words, we're looking through only 5 little holes, through observing and measuring devices that measure less than 1% of all there is to measure. And finally, when we look at the world through language, we look at the world through our cult's lens of perception. We learn language from our cult, and through the use of social norms in speaking/thinking, all thoughts correlating to a word, we determine which thoughts will grow and blossom and spread, and which thoughts will wither. And at any moment in time, a given culture thinks less than 1% of all there is to think. Even the sensory data we do perceive is selectively amplified, organized, etc., such that the brain registers 50% of the 1% that our sensory observing and measuring devices deliver. The word should is an anesthetic which obliterates some of the pain that we feel when we imagine a reality that we long for and are separate from. Reality is fractal in nature. The bigger patterns of energy, with us small in comparison, allow us to understand the nuance of fractal patterns that are present on a much smaller individual scale, but are harder to see directly. The purpose of a government, of a culture, of a them out there is to provide the opportunity to project ourselves in the positive and negative light upon reality, so that we can understand our own consciousness, our own minds, the same systems functioning on a smaller scale within human thought and within the reality of the individual. We are all on a journey that disappears from view the moment we achieve masterful conscious fun, this being the inevitable doorway all conscious evolution arrives to. We are all on a journey that disappears from view the moment we achieve masterful conscious fun, this being the inevitable doorway all conscious evolution arrives at. If we were smaller, the reality that we would perceive around us would be smaller. If we were bigger, the reality we would perceive around us would be bigger. The fact that we are the size that we are determines the fact that we pay the most attention to and create and weave reality out of objects, out of energy patterns that are generally within 1,000th of the human body. 1,000 times bigger, 1,000 times smaller. Most of our attention is focused on objects in that very narrow band of the spatial continuum. Fun is the ultimate self-referential value because it needs no other external value to justify its own existence. It is more fun to have masterful fun than not to, thus leading all evolution towards mastery and all mastery towards fun. What would you do if everything already was exactly as it was, with full and total acceptance? As we improve reality, we heal and minimize pain. As we heal and minimize pain, we enter more fully, open up more sensitively to what is, leading initially to new awareness, to heightened awareness of pain and fear acting on a subtler level, which in turn, through awareness, leads to a process of mastery, thus creating an infinite series of doorways in which pain is felt, opened to, understood, and healed at a certain octave, at a certain intensity, leading to the creation of a reality with less pain, leading to a heightening of new sensitivity, creating awareness of pain at a subtler level, leading to understanding mastery and the healing of pain at that subtle level, and stepping through one doorway into another with less pain, while upping one's ability to track the pain and joy that remains. Another way of noticing this truth and pattern is that of hedonic adaptation. If I knew all along that there is one inside of me that laughs with innocence in the face of all thought and all feeling, I might know the one that is capable of being all-encompassing, all-loving, all-knowing, as the God, Goddess, polarity that is possible, that is present within each human being. If I knew all along that there was one inside of us who laughs innocently and freely at thoughts and the sensation and feelings those thoughts produce, I might know the wonder it is to be God, to be Goddess, to be connected and at one with all that is. The perfection of evolution is its self-correcting, self-reflective nature. When, as system, nature loves and fosters all parts of the system is supported by all parts of itself in turn. When a system or system hierarchy abuses, betrays, damages any part of a system, those parts of the system rebel against those parts of the system that would lead to their diminishment. In this way, the system is challenged to reform, to refine and grow, or to collapse and make room for a more sophisticated system, for a more intelligent system that feeds and nourishes sustainably more of its parts. All discrepancies between our map of reality and reality lead to failure, which in turn leads to pain, which in turn leads to consciousness, which in turn leads to awareness, which in turn leads to modification and attunement, such that the map of reality becomes a more effective rendition of what is. All successful maps of reality lead to fun, lead to success, lead to power and confidence, which ultimately leads to sustainable well-being. This is why, whether we are currently failing or succeeding, success itself, in one form or another, is inevitable. The only question is whether the energy contained in our form is broken down or is part of that success. The law of mass dictates that when a smaller energy interacts with a larger energy, that when a pinball collides with a bowling ball, the pinball refracts off and the bowling ball continues on its original course, slowing down slightly as it absorbs the opposing mass of the pinball. This has nothing to do with the law or measurement of intelligence. In fact, the majority in social ecospheres, the cult, the culture, the majority contains the largest mass and is in tension with a distinct minority that is the most measurably intelligent body in the reality. There is a tension between the law of mass, which says that the majority continues its course when it intersects with a minority, and the law of intelligence, which measures the efficiency of that intelligence by the rate at which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. Everything perceived by a human mind has a neutral potential to be equally positive or negative relative to a perceived and stated value. The majority has never been correct and never can be in the history or future of humanity. The bell curve of adoption and innovation is such that the majority, by definition, will be using an outdated technology that is most widely adopted at the same time that a distinct minority will have created a new technology that is more intelligent. The law of intelligence and the law of mass must always be at odds with the distinct minority of bleeding-edge innovators requiring the cooperation of the majority for the adoption and funding of new technology. This tension between the majority that holds the power and the minority that holds the latest technology is often bridged by the gift and talent of the shaman, of the way shower, of the teacher, and the spiritual priest, which make these roles vital in a growing, thriving, and healthy culture. Every dimension of reality, be it geometry, mathematics, language, sight, sound, or smell, allows us to see a facet of reality otherwise obscured from view. Thus, the complexity of our dimensionality determines the depth perception of the reality we experience. The multidimensionality, the complexity of dimensionality, determines the depth with which we perceive reality. Depth being measured by the integrated, multifaceted perception of a given field of energy we call reality. Conscious and unconscious fun is the predestined fate of all consciousness, for no other reason than that it's more fun to have fun than not to have fun. And all consciousness is on a trajectory towards mastery, towards excellence. And the next step in the hierarchical value journey. The very next step beyond mastery is fun, because it's fun to have fun. Within duality, within conscious reality, there are distinctions leading to extreme. All extremes are in process. The process of black becoming white, of white becoming black, of young becoming old, of old becoming young, of listening moving to speaking and speaking moving to listening. All consciousness is a process of extremes flowing one into the other. All things that exist in 3 dimensions or 3 densities simultaneously. The possible, the probable, and the actual. It's the same reality, just at 3 different densities. All human identity is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and action. All sustained identities are patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, and action that, when interacting with a stable environment, experiences reward on the underlying continuum of seeking to feel good and avoiding feeling bad. Thus, all sustained cultural identities are the identities that the cult rewards by making an easier path to climb the hierarchy of human needs by adopting that identity than by rejecting it. Shifting identity begins with developing a friendly rapport with the unknown, with its neutral positive and negative continuum relative to our values. Identities are a form of technology. They shift when we alter our environment or perception of our environment by developing a superior map of reality that yields higher levels of sustainable well-being per unit of energy relative to the prior identity, to the prior technology that we employed. Violence begins when something perceived as beautiful, good, and true is violated in the eyes of the observer. Violated identities, patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing, patterns of paradigms that go unrepaired threaten the sense of self, leading to a defense by violating one's own or another's boundaries. All violence begins in the eyes of the perceiver, when a pattern of energy that is perceived as beautiful, good, and true is violated, and the violence is escalated when that which is violated is defended. All energy patterns that take less energy to adopt or allow than they do to stop ripple outwards until such time as they dissipate, inertia, or encounter an energy pattern containing more mass and energy than the original pattern. All energy patterns that take less energy to adopt or allow than they do to stop ripple outwards until they dissipate with inertia or encounter an energy pattern containing more mass and energy and is thus able to absorb the new pattern. Every distinction exists on an infinite continuum. Once the polarity has been defined, there is always something better and something worse, something less likely and more likely. In this sense, progress, or going backwards, is determined by the starting point and current trajectory relative to a given value. That which is created consumes and thus changes or destroys its creator. A culture's intelligence can be measured by how universally and rapidly each of its members fulfill core human needs: to survive, to feel secure in that survival, to experience love and belonging, to earn one's self-respect through becoming the person we want to be, by developing our gifts, by bringing those gifts into the world, and by becoming a part of a system, of a value, of a pattern of energy that is bigger than the limited human self. Our brains, and all human brains and consciousness, have 5 basic operating systems. The reptilian brain, or operating system, allows us to survive through fight, flight, freeze, and fawn in sociopathic environments. The limbic brain allows us to become conscious and notice and feel our reactivity. The rational brain allows us to become proactive and increase efficiency through pattern recognition and projection of the past upon the future. The empathic brain or operating system allows love, empathy, compassion, and partnering with others from a warm-hearted place. The transcendent operating system or brain allows our consciousness to move beyond the limited illusion of separation and begin to experience and participate in the synergies that are only possible for human beings in field consciousness. The synergy of an iron filing, understanding its innate magnetic connection to a geometric shape such that one dot can become one part of a more complex and larger pattern, is necessary for higher forms of intelligence.